Yo-ho and a bottle of rum. So this is a video I've been putting off for a while. Not necessarily because I'm worried about what people think about me, but just because I haven't really felt like it. Now before we begin the video, I just want to start off by saying I don't condone piracy, and if a game is currently available on market, you absolutely should support the developers. So don't go around emulating fucking PS5 and Nintendo Switch games. At least if you don't already physically own them. I mean, if you own physical copies of games, you should be allowed to do whatever the hell you want with them. Now, as far as digital games go, that's a somewhat different story, because apparently if you buy games digitally, you don't actually own them, so by that logic, pirating isn't stealing either, is it? But anyway, I've got my unshaven facial hair and my one-piece shirt, so let me explain to you all why I sail the high seas. Now, as far as emulation goes, I don't actually emulate on PC, mainly because my PC can barely run Chrome, let alone a fucking video game. Luckily, a lot of video game consoles can be modded for that very purpose. Now, as far as the more modern systems go, that can be pretty risky because you can get banned, so I definitely don't recommend doing that. But as far as some of the older consoles that developers don't really care anymore, I'd say they're fair game. I myself actually have several modded consoles, including a bunch of modded mini consoles, a modded Wii U, and a modded PS3, just to name a few. Now, as to why I went out of my way to mod all these consoles? Simple. The secondhand gaming market's a fucking scam. Like, no, I'm being dead fucking serious, dude. If you go online and look up just about any retro game, the prices are fucking ridiculous, okay? I played Chibi Robo about a year ago. And you wanna know how much I paid for it? Not $400, I'll tell you that. And that's the biggest problem with playing retro games, is a lot of times your only choice is either paying out the ass for a physical copy or emulating it. You have absolutely no other choice. Now, every so often, games will get re-released, and when they do, I'm more than happy to buy the remastered version of a game I want to play. But oftentimes, retro games are locked to the console that they originally came out on, and as a result, they end up being in high demand and skyrocket in price. Another problem is game collectors. You know, the ones who like having video games on their shelves and don't even necessarily play them half the time, they just like having them. Meanwhile, those of us who want to actually fucking play the games are stuck doing morally ambiguous things like emulating video games. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't collect video games as a hobby. If you have the money to spend, why not? I ain't gonna tell you what to do with your money. If you want to spend $50,000 on bullshit, be my guest. But don't go bitching at people who emulate video games just because they want to save a few $1,000s. And dude, if you thought it was bad before, post-COVID game collecting is fucking brutal. Like, at about the tail end of 2019, I was feeling nostalgic for Paper Mario: Thousand Year Door and kind of wanted to play it again because I'd had it as a kid, but I sold it like a dumbass, and it was $60, and I didn't really want to spend that much on an older game. Fast forward to like mid-2020, and the game had literally doubled in price, and at that point, I finally got sick of it and just modded my Wii and played a Paper Mario: Thousand Year Door ROM instead. Of course, now the game's getting re-released, which is great, but just a few years ago, that wasn't an option, so desperate times call for desperate measures. Speaking of Nintendo, Nintendo tends to be the absolute worst when it comes to being anti-emulation, but here's the thing. If you're not selling the fucking games, what difference does it make? That's the way I see it, okay? Because, like, the secondhand gaming market If you buy a game used on Amazon, Nintendo does not see an ounce of that money, right? Buying games online is basically just to soothe your guilty conscience. That's all it is. Like, there's literally no difference between paying $1,000 for a game on Amazon or just fucking emulating it. Like, either way, Nintendo does not see an ounce of that money. And if you don't want people emulating your games, sell the fucking games! That's all. That's all you have to do. There was an interview a few years back where someone was basically asking someone at Nintendo if they had any plans of bringing back Virtual Console. And they said no. They said that they had absolutely no obligation to make their retro library available to the public.
Excuse me, what?
And yet they wonder why people emulate their games. Like, if Nintendo has no obligation to sell the games, we have no obligation to buy the games, okay? It's like someone taking someone's money away and being like, why are you poor? Why can't you afford anything? Like, the logic makes no fucking sense. And sure, there's Nintendo's online service where you can stream a bunch of retro games, but nobody wants to pay for an online service that barely fucking works just so they can have access to a bunch of retro games. We'd rather be able to buy the ones we want individually and say fuck you to the ones we don't. Not to mention, I've heard the emulation on those games is hot garbage, like apparently Paper Mario would delete your save data and Ocarina of Time had a bunch of input lag. Meanwhile, playing the games on a fucking emulator, they run a hell of a lot better. And sure, emulation does have drawbacks. I'm constantly having games crash and having to fuck around with the emulator settings just to fix it. There's also a bunch of compatibility issues, graphical glitches that make the game borderline unplayable, or at the very least turn it into a fucking horror game. Like, I was trying to play Ark the Lad End of Darkness on my modded PS3 and this shit happened. Yeah, therapist? When's the earliest I can see you? Yeah, I tried to emulate a game again. You're free next Tuesday? Okay, good. See you then. But hey, you get what you pay for, I guess. It's like, what would you rather do? Deal with the emulator issues and power through, or pay out the ass for a physical copy? Pick your poison. Anyway, I think that'll about do it for the video. I'm sure this video isn't super great. As usual, it's unscripted and unstructured, but I hope I got my point across well enough. Anyway, whatever. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.